The Invisible Basilica of Sabazius. Gnostic Saints 29 to 35, including Paracelsus, Ulrich von Hutten, Christian Rosencreutz, Jacobus, Burgundus, Molensis the Martyr, Roger Bacon, Frederick of Hohenstaufen, and William of Schyren. Paracelsus, 1494 to 1541, by Dao Apirion. Paracelsus is the Latinized pen name of Philippus Areolus Theophrastus Bombastus von Hohenheim, Swiss physician and German philosopher and theologist, metallurgist and alchemist, magician and scientist, traveling medicine man and father of the science of pharmacology. He was a close contemporary of Rabbi Lei and Ulrich von Hutten, and Crowley considered him to be an adaptus exemptus. The father of Paracelsus was a doctor, and the bastard son of a German nobleman, having intelligence and education but no endowment. Although he was brought up in poverty in the countryside of Switzerland, Paracelsus was exposed from an early age to the erudition and to the library of his father. Always empathetic to the suffering of others, he decided to pursue a career in medicine. He soon became extremely frustrated with the pomposity and insensitivity of the privileged caste of physicians, and with the academic medical community's dogmatic fixation on the theories of Galen and Avicenna. He resolved to revolutionize medicine himself through the diligent study of nature, in essence by experiment and observation. This study he referred to as magic. He abandoned his academic studies and began a series of very extensive travels, collecting medical anecdotes and folk remedies, treating the sick, and conducting medical and alchemical experiments. He traveled all over Europe and visited the Holy Land in Egypt. He even traveled to Central Asia. While staying with the Grand Duke of Russia, he was captured during an invasion by the Tartars and taken to their capital. He combined the information he compiled on his travels with the theological doctrines of Duns Scotus and Nicolas de Cusa, the magical teachings of Trithemius, see below, the Christian Kabbalism of Giovanni Pico della Mirandola, and Johann Reuchlin, and the theories of alchemy to synthesize a completely new view of medicine. He rejected the Galenic theory of illness as a result of conflicts among the four humors, and the ideas that health and disease are determined by astrology and the influence of saints and demons. Paracelsus placed no reliance on supernatural forces in his work. To Paracelsus, magic meant the use of natural forces, which were not yet completely understood. He developed the novel conceptions that the human body is an organic, self-constituted, sovereign whole, and that it is subject to the same natural forces to which animals and plants are subject. His idea of treatment was that the doctor assists the body to heal itself through its own natural healing processes, which ran against the conventional wisdom of the time, which was that the doctor had to overcome nature to achieve healing. He founded the science of chemical pharmacology, divorced psychology from theology and demonology, and did pioneering work in the fields of occupational medicine, psychiatry, and gynecology. He discovered zinc. The idea that herbal medicines contain active principles is his, and he coined the terms chemistry and protoplasm. He also contributed that aspect of salt to the alchemical philosophical theory of the three alchemical principles: salt, sulfur, and mercury. Having established his medical techniques and theories, he proceeded to promulgate them, severely attacking medical orthodoxy wherever he went. He obtained several decent positions during his lifetimes, but due to his lack of formal academic credentials, his arrogance, his lack of patience, his coarse manners, his association with people of the lower classes, and his lack of social and political skills, he always ran afoul of the local elite and was soon forced to flee, despite his remarkable successes with his patients. Later in life, after the collapse of the Reformation, Paracelsus underwent a conversion experience. He began to reevaluate his natural philosophies in terms of religion and rejected much of it as incompatible with his new religious feelings. He remained a Catholic, but rejected much established Catholic dogma, such as the resurrection of the flesh. The state of being in a coma was thought that of being dead, and the immortality of the soul. If it is material, he thought, then it must have some decay. His religious philosophy was that of the simple life, with salvation secured not by works or by faith, but by love. Still later, he reconciled himself with science and published his great synthetic treatise, Philosophia Sagax, S-A-G-A-X. Even though he was able to reconcile himself with science, he was never able to bring together the two souls of God and nature which dwelt within his breast. The Sword of Paracelsus was taken up in earnest after his death, and the established medical orthodoxy soon crumbled. His followers soon established their own orthodoxies in his name, some just as irrational and ineffective as those he had fought against. The memory of Paracelsus is revered by chemists, physicians, philosophers, and occultists of all stripes as a courageous pioneer and soldier in the army of truth. Modern occultists who revere Paracelsus should always keep in mind that he was the sworn enemy of the superstitions of his day. It is the task of the true occultist to constantly challenge orthodoxies and superstitions, never to buttress or coddle them. The major works of Paracelsus include a book on nymphs, gnomes, giants, dwarves, incubi and succubi, stars and signs. Once again, a book on nymphs, gnomes, giants, dwarves, incubi and succubae, stars and signs, 1515. Orthodoxa Medicinae, 1524. Volumen Paramirum, 1525. Intimatio, 1527. Diseases which deprive man of his reason, 1528. Per Granum, 1529. 8 books on the origin and causes of the French disease, 1529. Opus Paramirum, 1530. Invisible diseases, 1531. Great surgery book, 1535. Philosophia Sagax, 1536, Seven Divisiones, 1538, The Doctor's Labyrinth, 1538, and Prognostication for the Coming 24 Years, 1538. References: Barrett Francis, The Magus, or Celestial Intelligencer, 1801, Citadel, Secaucus, New Jersey, 1967. Hartmann Franz, The Life and Philippus Theophrastus Bombast of Hohenheim, known by the name of Paracelsus, and the Substance of His Teachings, K. Paul, Trench, Trubner and Company, London, 1887. Mackintosh, Christopher, The Rosicrucians, The History and Mythology of an Occult Order, Crucible, Wellingborough, 1987. Pachter, Henry M., Magic into Science. The Story of Paracelsus, Henry Schumann, New York, 1951. Seligman, Kurt, Magic, Supernaturalism and Religion, Pantheon, New York, 1948 to 1971. Original publication, 5/24/95. Originally published in Red Flame No. 2, Mystery of Mystery, A Primer of Thelemic Ecclesiastical Gnosticism, by Tao Apirion and Helena, Berkeley, California, 1995. Era Vulgaris. Our next saint is Ulrich von Hutten. Ulrich von Hutten, 1488 to 1523, Era Vulgaris. By Tao Apirion, German patriot, poet, knight, classical scholar, satirist, and Renaissance humanist. Hutten was a contemporary of Rabbi Lei and Paracelsus and was a key figure in the German Reformation. He allied himself with Reuchlin, Erasmus, and particularly Luther in the battle to free Germany from the yoke of Rome. He published Luther's works and Lorenzo Valla's refutation of the donation of Constantine, as well as his own attacks on the corruption of the Church and its political thralls. His efforts to unite the German nobility and free cities against the tyranny of Rome and the corruption of the princes and the clerical benefice hunters ultimately failed, and he was forced to flee the country to Switzerland. He took refuge in Zurich with Zwingli, the leader of the Reformation movement, where he died at the age of 41, of Vidi. References: Holborn, Heiho, Ulrich von Hutten and the German Reformation, translated by Roland H. Bainton, 1937, Harper and Row, New York, 1965, Jackson, Samuel McCulley, Editor-in-Chief, The New Chef, Herzog, Encyclopedia of Religious Knowledge, Baker Book House, Grand Rapids, Michigan, 1953. Pachter, Henry M., Magic into Science, The Story of Paracelsus, Henry Schumann, New York, 1951. Original publication date 5/24/95. Originally published in Red Flame No. 2, Mystery of Mystery, A Primer of Thelemic Ecclesiastical Gnosticism, by Tao Apirion and Helena, Berkeley, California, 1995, EV. The next saint is Christian Rosencreutz, 1378 to 1484, Era Vulgaris, Mythic, by Tao Apirion. The legendary hero of the Fama Fraternitatis and chemical wedding of Christian Rosencreutz of Andrea, QV, and founder of the Rosicrucians. Crowley considered Christian Rosencreutz to have been a man under a different name, who was a master of the temple. See Part 3 of The Heart of the Master. The Fama Fraternitatis, 1614, deals with the life of the most godly and highly illuminated father, our brother C.R., who spent his childhood in a cloister, learning Greek, Latin, and medicine, traveled to Damascus as a youth, where he learned physics and mathematics, then to Fez, where he learned Kabbalah, magic, and alchemy. From Fez, he traveled to Spain and attempted to teach, but his teachings were rejected. He returned to Germany and established a school, and began to accept students from his old cloister. This was the beginning of the Fraternity of the Red Cross. Ultimately, the school consisted of 8 brethren, and when they had perfected their doctrines and methods, they decided to disperse into all countries to disseminate their teachings. They agreed on 6 principles. 1. That none of them should profess any other thing than to cure the sick, and that gratis. 2. None of them should be constrained to wear one certain kind of habit, but therein to follow the custom of the country. 3. That every year on the day, C. They should meet together in the house, S. Spiritus, or write the cause of their absence. 4. Every brother. At the moment, it is the plague of 2020. Every brother should look about for a worthy person who, after his decease, might succeed him. 5. The word CR should be their seal, mark, and character. And 6. The fraternity should remain secret 100 years. Brother R.C. died at the age of 106. His tomb was discovered 120 years later. In 1604, by some of the successors of the brothers who had returned to the original building to make repairs. The tomb was opened, and inside was discovered a 7-sided vault with a central cylindrical altar. Upon moving the altar aside, they discovered a brass plate, which they removed, and discovered the body of Brother C.R.C., whole and unconsumed, with all of his ornaments and attires. Radiallahu an. References: Crowley, Alistair, The Heart of the Master, Ordo Templi Orientis, 1938, New Falcon Publications, Scottsdale, Arizona, 1992. McIntosh Christopher, The Rosicrucians, The History and Mythology of an Occult Order, Crucible, Wellingborough, 1987. Seligman, Kurt, Magic, Supernaturalism, and Religion, Pantheon, New York, 1948 to 1971. Waite, author Edward, The Real History of the Rosicrucians, London, 1887. Yates, Francis, The Rosicrucian Enlightenment, Arc, London, 1972 to 1986. Original publication date 5/24/95. Originally published in Red Flame No. 2, Mystery of Mystery, a Primer of Thelemic Ecclesiastical Gnosticism by Tal Apirion and Helena, Berkeley, California, 1995, EV. The next saint is Jacobus, Burgundus, Molensis, the Martyr, 1243 to 1314 EV, by Tal Apirion. Jacques de Molay, 22nd and last Grand Master of the Knights Templar, See Part 3 of The Heart of the Master. The Knights Templar were founded in 1118 Anno Domini to protect pilgrims on their way to Jerusalem and establish their headquarters at the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. The order lasted 189 years and became one of the wealthiest and most powerful single institutions in Europe. The Knights Templar were officially recognized as an order by Pope Honorius in 1128, with the enthusiastic support of King Baldwin II of Jerusalem and Bernard de Clairvaux, later Saint Bernard. They were given their first land, their rule, and their habit. The rule was based on that of the Cistercian order, and the habit was a plain white mantle with a red cross. Their banner, called the Bosant, consisted of 2 vertical bars, one black and one white. The word Bosant was also the Templar battle cry, and may be roughly translated as, "Be glorious." In 1162, the papal bull Omne Datum Optimum was issued by Pope Alexander III, which gave the Order of the Temple enormous potential power. It released them from all spiritual ties except to the Holy See itself, permitted them to have their own chaplains and special burial grounds in their own houses, freed them from paying tithes to the church, and allowed them to collect their own tithes. The order also had an effective policy of recruitment. Service in the order, which coupled adherence to strict monastic vows with the constant threat of mutilation or death on the battlefield, was considered adequate penance to compensate for any sin. Therefore, murderers, thieves, fornicators, and even heretics were welcomed, provided they renounced their former ways and embraced the order's sacred vows. This policy may have infused the order with free thinkers, and, in fact, a number of self-avowed penitent Cathar heretics, members of an ascetic, Gnostic Christian sect which dominated southern France and northern Italy from about 1150, were taken into the order during the years of the atrocious Albigensian Crusade in South France, 1209 to 1250 Era Vulgar. The order was composed of several classes: full brothers or knights, sergeants, chaplains, serving brothers, and clients. The order did not confer knighthood. Only knights were admitted as full brothers. At their initiation, which was held in secret, they swore the 3 basic monastic vows of chastity, not abstention, chastity, poverty, and obedience. The vow of poverty required the new knight to vest all his money and property in the order. They were vested with the habit of the order, white for knights, black for sergeants, green for chaplains, and a sheepskin girdle or cord which they were never to remove, as a token of their vow of chastity. They were prohibited from bathing, and knights were prohibited from shaving their beards. The Templars fought with the other Crusaders against Saladin during the Second Crusade, which failed. During their time in Palestine, many of the knights became fluent in Arabic, and there was undoubtedly a significant amount of discourse between the Templars and the Muslims. There has always been a great deal of speculation regarding the possibility that the Templar order may have been influenced by the assassins of Hassani Sabah, due to certain similarities of organizational structure. This can be explored in the book that has been released posthumously, very recently, death of Brother James Wasserman, and his book is called Hassan E. Sabah. Again, there has always been a great deal of speculation regarding the possibility that the Templar order may have been influenced by the assassins of Hassan ibn Sabah due to certain similarities of organizational structure. After Jerusalem was lost, the Templar headquarters was transferred to Paris, and the Templars focused their power in the West. They were principally concentrated in France and England, but owned extensive properties in Portugal, Castile, Leon, Scotland, Ireland, Germany, Italy, and Sicily. When fully developed, they had over 9,000 preceptories, plus mills and markets. Many Templar preceptories and churches still exist. Templar churches are characterized by their circular shape. Donation to the Templars was a popular form of charity, especially with the nobility. This income, coupled with the wealth of all its entering members, soon resulted in a substantial surplus of funds. At their height, they were estimated to have an annual income of £6 million sterling. This money was put to use providing what were essentially the first banking services in Europe. Jacques de Molay was born into a noble family of Burgundy and entered the Order of the Temple in 1265. He immediately proceeded to Palestine, where he distinguished himself in the war against the Muslims under the Grand Mastership of William de Beaujeu. He was unanimously elected Grand Master upon the death of Theobald Guadinius in 1298. In 1306, King Philip IV the Fair, Philippe le Bel, of France took refuge in the Templar headquarters in Paris to escape a civil commotion. Philip and the Knights had always been on good terms, and Philip had even chosen de Molay to be godfather to one of his children. Here he observed firsthand the real wealth of the order. Philip was bankrupt and faced with severe governmental problems. He contrived a scheme to obtain control over the wealth and holdings of the Templars. They were to be accused of heresy and immorality. Pope Clement V, who had been enthroned through the assistance of Philip in 1305, invited the Grand Master of the Templars, Jacques de Molay, to Poitiers for a conference. In the meantime, 2 imprisoned ex-Templars were found and offered their freedom if they would betray the order. A number of charges against the order were drawn up, including collusion with the Saracens, secret profession of paganism or Mohammedanism, requiring all novices to deny Christ, to trample and spit upon the cross, and to bestow obscene kisses upon their prior. The tolerance and even encouragement of sodomy among the membership, and the secret adoration of an idol, mysteriously called Baphomet, which consisted of either a bearded head or an androgynous figure. On Friday, October 13, 1307, Ere Vogel, Jacques de Molay and many of his brethren were arrested and thrown into prison. The king took possession of the temple in Paris. The knights were tortured to extract confessions, and, not surprisingly, many confessions were obtained. Most were contradictory. De Molay himself confessed under torture to doctrinal unorthodoxy. De Molay was publicly sentenced on March 12, 1314. As to make his confession to the crowd, he stepped forward, but instead of admitting guilt, he proclaimed his innocence and that of the order, condemning himself to martyrdom. That evening he was bound to a stake surrounded by combustible materials, and the torch of his executioners applied. With his last words, he invoked vengeance on Philip and Clement. Clement died the following month, and Philip died under mysterious circumstances the following November. The Templar order was formally suppressed in all countries of Europe except Scotland. References: Bejan, Michel, Richard Lei and Henry Lincoln, Holy Bread, Holy Grail. Dale, New York, 1982. Crowley, Alistair, The Heart of the Master, Ordo Templi Orientis, 1938, New Falcon Publications, Scottsdale, Arizona, 1992. Goodrich, Norma Lore, The Holy Grail, HarperCollins, New York, 1992. Howarth, Stevens, The Knights Templar, Dorset Press, New York, 1982. Mackenzie Kenneth, The Royal Masonic Cyclopedia, Aquarian Press, Willingboro, 1987. Mackey, Albert G., Encyclopedia of Freemasonry, Masonic History Company, New York, 1909. Robinson, John J., Born in Blood, The Lost Secrets of Freemasonry, M. Evans and Company, New York, 1989. Rudolf Kurtz, Gnosis, Harper and Row, San Francisco, 1977. Original publication date 5/24/95. Originally published in Red Flame No. 2, Mystery of Mystery, a primer of Thelemic ecclesiastical Gnosticism by Tao Apirion and Helena, Berkeley, California, 1995, EV. The next saint is Roger Bacon, 1214 to 1294, Era Vulgaris, by Tao Apirion. An English Franciscan friar, alchemist, astrologer, mathematician, and early empirical scientist, persecuted by the church for his beliefs, he studied at the university in Paris, where he taught philosophy from about 1240 to 1247. He then went to Oxford. He joined the Franciscan order in 1257. According to Bacon's own writings, he was profoundly influenced by the teachings of an unknown philosopher known only as Master Peter. In 1267 to 68, at the request of Pope Clement IV, Bacon published three major works, Opus Majus, Opus Minus, and Opus Tertium, in which he proposed educational reforms based on the value of observation and measurement of nature. He recommended that the study of languages, mathematics, alchemy, and experimental science should replace the traditional medieval university curriculum. In Opus Majus, he attempted to join all learning, wisdom, and faith in a unified concept. In 1272, he published the Compendium of the Study of Philosophy, in which he harshly criticized the philosophical methods of his contemporaries. His advocacy of empiricism over the dogmatic scholasticism of his day, coupled with accusations of teachings just short of heresy, led to his imprisonment by order of the Franciscan Minister General for several years in the 1270s. In 1292, he published the Compendium of the Study of Theology, in which his criticism was directed toward the theological methods of his contemporaries. After his death, he began to be spoken of as having been a sorcerer or a miracle worker. Some attribute the invention of black powder outside of China, the camera, the clock, the telescope, and steam power to Bacon. He was referred to as Dr. Mirabilis, Dr. Miracle, by his alchemical admirers. Por mirabilis ad astra. By miracles, we go to the stars. References: Barrett Francis, The Magus, or Celestial Intelligencer, 1801, Citadel, Secaucus, New Jersey, 1967. Buck Richard Maurice, Cosmic Consciousness, 1901, E. P. Dutton and Company, New York, 1923. Graham Lloyd M., Deception and Myths of the Bible, Citadel, New York, 1975. Seligman, Kurt, Magic, Supernaturalism, and Religion, Pantheon, New York, 1948 to 1971. And see here, there's a link. It is to Maths History, MATHS, once again, MATHS, HISTORY dot st-andrews.ac.uk/biographies/Bacon. mathshistory.standrews.ac.uk biographies Bacon. Roger Bacon, quick info, born 1214, Ilchester, Somerset, England. Died Oxford, England. Summary: Roger Bacon was an English mathematician. His most important mathematical contribution is the application of geometry to optics. Biography: Roger Bacon's parents were well-off landowners. His father, however, must have had a high regard for education, since 2 of his sons became academics, and he was prepared to support them financially. Before giving the few details of his early years that are known, we should say a little about the date of birth we have given for Roger. All that is known is that in 1267, Bacon wrote the following: "I have labored diligently in sciences and languages, and 40 years have passed since I first learned the alphabet. I have always been studious, and for all but 2 of these 40 years, I have been in study." The date of 1214 is arrived at by assuming that the passage means that 40 years have passed since he began his university studies. These began at the age of 13. So 53 from 1267 gives the date of 1214 as the year of his birth. There is, however, another interpretation. This is to accept as a literal fact that he first learned the alphabet in 1227. If so, then perhaps he was born around 1222. But would Bacon claim to have been in study since the age of 5? This would seem unlikely for the son of landowners of this period. Roger was not the oldest of his parents' sons, so he would not have been expected to inherit the family estates and wealth. It is likely that his parents would have expected him to have become a priest, which was the usual route for a son, other than the first, of a family in their position. Although there is no record of Roger's education before he entered Oxford University, it is likely that he would have been taught Latin and arithmetic by the local priests to prepare him for university studies. where all teaching was carried out in Latin. At the age of 13, he entered Oxford University, his father putting up the money for his board, subsistence, and tuition. Of course, we must not think of Bacon's university course in terms of the 3 or 4 year university course of today. Entering university at the age of 13 meant that the university was providing both what would be considered today as a secondary and tertiary education. So Bacon would have spent many years of study at Oxford. His initial studies covered the trivium of grammar, logic, and rhetoric. He then progressed to the quadrivium, studying geometry, arithmetic, music, and astronomy. He received his master's degree from the University of Oxford and remained there teaching until 1241. The teachings of Aristotle had been banned at the University of Paris for several years on the grounds that Aristotle was not a Christian, having lived some years before Christ. However, in the early 1240s, Paris reintroduced the teachings of Aristotle into their courses. They looked to the young lecturer Bacon, who had become an expert on Aristotle at Oxford, where his teachings formed a major part of the course material, to lecture at the University of Paris on Aristotle's ideas. He joined the Faculty of Arts in Paris, which was divided into 4 administrative units, 3 being French and 1, which Bacon joined, being English. This was only an administrative setup and in no way indicated the language of teaching, which, like Oxford, was Latin. Students who find 9 a.m. lectures impossibly early in universities today should note that lectures in Paris in Bacon's time began at 6 a.m. We should note that up to this time, Bacon showed little interest in science. It was while at Paris that he met Peter Peregrinus, who was to be a major influence on him. Bacon later wrote, "Peregrinus gains knowledge of matters of nature, medicine, and alchemy through experiment, and all that is in the heaven and in the earth beneath. Moreover, he has considered the experiments and the fortune-telling of the old witches, and their spells, and those of all magicians, and so too the illusions and wiles of all conjurers, and this so that nothing may escape him which ought to be known, and that he may perceive how far to reprove all that is false and magical." Peregrinus later wrote a famous treatise on magnets while serving as an engineer in the army of Charles I of Anjou. His masterpiece was written while the army was besieging Lucera in Italy in August 1269, while on a crusade approved by the Pope. Bacon's interest in mathematics and natural philosophy, probably aroused by Peregrinus, took over his life in Oxford after he returned there in 1247. It became a passion into which he poured all his family's wealth. He bought books, equipment, instruments, and mathematical tables. These were all very expensive, for all books were in manuscript, and each volume had to be copied by hand. He was much influenced by the writings of Grosseteste, and he embarked on a deep study of languages, mathematics, optics, and sciences. So hard did he study that he had no time for friends or the university life around him. He was so fully occupied with his studies that those around him marveled that his health stood up to the long hours he spent. His most important mathematical contribution is the application of geometry to optics. He said, "Mathematics is the door and the key to the sciences." Bacon had read Al-Haytham's Optics, and this made him realize the importance of the application of mathematics to real-world problems. He followed Grosseteste in emphasizing the use of lenses for magnification to aid natural vision. He carried out some systematic observations with lenses and mirrors. He seems to have planned and interpreted these experiments with a remarkably modern scientific approach. However, many experiments are described in his writings, which he never carried out in practice. Lindbergh says Bacon's experiments included contrived or artificial experiments, casual everyday experience, reports of the experiences of other observers, the spiritual experience of divine illumination, and what I, Lindbergh, call geometrical experiments. In De Mirabile Potestate Artis et Nature, which is essentially a letter written around 1250, Bacon described his scientific ideas, in particular his ideas for mechanical devices, and some of his optic achievements. Bacon visited Paris in 1251, but later left the University of Oxford and entered the Order of Friars Minor, the Franciscan friary in Oxford. It is unclear exactly what his reasons were for this move. Certainly he was a devout Christian who believed that his scientific work would aid in understanding of the world, and so of God through understanding his creation. St. Augustine had encouraged Christians to learn from and make Christian use of the teachings of pagan philosophers. Bacon strongly believed in this teaching by St. Augustine and studied all the Greek and Arabic works he could lay his hands on. This was not the view of many in the Church, however, who believed that a study of the Scriptures was the only path to knowledge and disapproved of the study of non-Christian philosophers. Joining the Franciscans, who had a tradition of scholarship, may have been a move. Joining the Franciscans, who had a tradition of scholarship, may have been a move to give Bacon more protection from those opposed to his views. It may simply be that by this time his enormous expenditure on scientific study had used all his family's funds. He was forced to find a means to provide his keep. Some historians suggest that the move was largely due to ill health, perhaps caused by overwork. In the Oxford Friary, he continued his interest in the sciences. Study was a major part of the life of the friars, although Bacon's experimental science would have been a unique form. The friary had an excellent library, so, although he was now not allowed personal possessions by the rules of the order, he could still continue his scientific pursuits. However, in 1256, Richard of Cornwall became head of the academic side of the Franciscan order in England. This was unfortunate for Bacon, who was very critical of Richard's ideas. Perhaps, therefore, it is not surprising that soon after Richard was appointed, Bacon was forced to end his academic studies at the Oxford Friary and was sent to a friary in Paris. He wrote, "They forced me with unspeakable violence to obey their will." Orders. For about 10 years, Bacon had no personal contact with the outside world, although he was able to correspond by letter. One of the few academic tasks he was able to do during this time was work on calendar reform. His plea to the Pope to reform the calendar was not listened to, and when 300 years later the Church did reform the calendar along the lines suggested by Bacon, he received no credit for his early proposals. Bacon was also able to teach mathematics while in the Paris friary. So although it appears that the intention was to prevent him from undertaking research, which the Church did not approve, life of a sort was still possible. It was more likely that he had opposed the new head of his order and had to leave, not that they didn't approve of his work. Bacon contacted Cardinal de Folques in 1264, proposing to write a book on science which would be a benefit to the Church. There seemed to be some misunderstanding, for Cardinal de Folques got the idea that the book was already written and asked to see it. Bacon saw this as his only chance to restart his scientific studies and to be free from the Paris friary. However, with no money, and by now his family in England were ruined through choosing the losing political side, he had little means to produce the required text. However, in 1265, Cardinal de Folques became Pope Clement IV, and Bacon now had the support of the Pope. He contacted the Pope, who replied in a letter written on 22 June 1266, telling Bacon to write his book in secret so that his superiors would not know that he was breaking the rules of his order. This seemed impossible to Bacon, so he approached his superiors, showing them the Pope's request. He was allowed to proceed. By 1267, Bacon had written what looks remarkably similar to a grant proposal that a mathematician or scientist might make today. His proposal was for an encyclopedia of all the sciences, worked on by a team of collaborators, coordinated by a body in the Church. His proposal was contained in the rapidly composed Opus Maius, great work consisting of 840 pages, Opus Minus, smaller work, and Opus Tertium, third work. Bacon was aiming to show the Pope that sciences had a rightful role in the university curriculum and were important to the Church. He wrote down in Opus Maius an astounding collection of ideas. For example, he gave a proposal for a telescope. For we can so shape transparent bodies and arrange them in such a way with respect to our sight and objects of vision that the rays will be reflected and bent in any direction we desire, and under any angle we wish. We may see the object near or at a distance. So we might also cause the sun, moon, and stars in appearance to descend here below. This work also gives 42 degrees for the maximum altitude of the rainbow. A more accurate value than any previously given, and one which Bacon must have discovered by experiment. The article is an excellent account of how Bacon's ideas on logical theory evolved during his career. From his early work, he introduced innovations in semantic theory, and in Opus Maius, he extended these ideas, applying them to problems of theology and philosophy. The Opus Maius was sent to the Pope by a courier, John, who was Bacon's favorite pupil. We know that the manuscript reached Rome, but Pope Clement IV died before seeing it, and Bacon's chances of having his great project come to fruition vanished. About this time, however, Bacon was able to leave the friary in Paris and return to England. There he embarked on the great project he proposed to the Pope, starting to write the Communia Naturalium, General Principles of Natural Philosophy, and the Communia Mathematica, General Principles of Mathematical Science. The last work contains a study of quantity and the theory of proportions, which Bacon intended as part of Volume 2 of his Synthesis of Knowledge. Only parts were ever published. Probably most were never written. But again, there was some remarkable insight on astronomy and calendar reform, which Bacon had formed after making observations. It was reported that Bacon did sometimes use in the night season to ascend this place. His study on Foley Bridge, on an eyot midstream in the Thames, environed with waters, and there to take the altitude and distance of stars and make use of it for his own convenience. Bacon believed that the earth was a sphere and that one could sail around it. He estimated the distance to the stars, coming up with the answer 130 million miles. Around 1278, backing up, the solar system that we're in is shaped something like a stomach that reflects a skin of gold. And to the stars may literally mean to the point where the heliosphere ends and the outer space begins, where you could reach the stars. Around 1278, Bacon was put in prison in the convent of Ancona in Italy by his fellow Franciscans, the charge of suspected novelties in his teaching. Here friars who had views with which their superiors disagreed were put in solitary confinement and not allowed to speak even to their guard for fear their views would have influence. They were refused confession and denied absolution, so their superiors believed, and so did the imprisoned friars, they would go to hell for all eternity. A change in the Franciscan leadership in 1290, however, saw Raymond of Guafrede take control of the order, and following the teachings of love by St. Francis, released the prisoners in Ancona. Although we have no explicit evidence that Bacon was among these men, it seems very likely that he was, and he must have returned to England as soon as he could. From his writings, it is clear that Bacon had always argued for what he believed and against those he believed to be wrong. He continued to state his view, even after suffering the prison at Ancona for around 12 years. They were as aggressively stated in Compendium Studiae Theologiae, his last writings of 1293, as at any time in his life. Original publication date 5/9/95. Originally published in Red Flame No. 2, Mystery of Mystery, a primer of Thelemic ecclesiastical Gnosticism by Tau Apirion and Helena, Berkeley, California, 1995 EV. Frederick of Hohenstaufen, 1194 to 1250 Era Vulgaris, by Tau Apirion. Although this appellation could equally well apply to Frederick I Barbarossa, 1123 to 1190, King of Germany, 1152 to 1190, King of Italy, 1155 to 1190, Holy Roman Emperor, 1155 to 1190, and leader of the Third Crusade along with Richard the Lion-Hearted, Crowley probably intends reference to his grandson, Frederick II, 1194 to 1250, King of Sicily, 1197 to 1250, King of Germany, 1212 to 1250, Holy Roman Emperor, 1220 to 1250, and King of Jerusalem, 1228 to 1250. Frederick II, although a Hohenstaufen like his grandfather, was born in Sicily and brought up under the influence of Norman, Byzantine, and Muslim cultures. He was a patron of the arts and sciences and a philosopher, poet, and scientist in his own right, writing a scholarly treatise on the art of falconry, among other things. He founded the University of Naples, and his court at Palermo was a center for learned men and for troubadours and mini-singers from France and Germany, possibly including the mini-singer known as Der Tannhäuser and Wolfram von Eschenbach, the poet who wrote Parzival, the astronomer and musician Michael Scott, the physician, astrologer, and magician Arnold of Villanova, the mathematician Leonardo da Pisa, known as Fibonacci, and St. Thomas Aquinas. He was fluent in French, German, Italian, Greek, Latin, and Arabic. His vast erudition and wide range of talents earned him the nickname Stupor Mundi, the marvel of the world. With respect to religion, Frederick viewed Christianity as little more than a means to expand his empire. He was essentially a libertine materialist, though he requested Christian absolution on his deathbed. Although he participated in the persecution of Roman Catholic heretics, he was tolerant of Jews and Muslims and welcomed them to his court. His troubles with the church began when, after having announced his intention to go on a crusade at his coronation as King of Germany, he postponed actually taking up the cross for 15 years. Instead, he used the papal protection given a crusader to help him consolidate his holdings in Italy. Pope Honorius tolerated Frederick's procrastination, but his successor, Gregory IX, was less charitable and excommunicated him upon receiving the tiara in 1227 EV. In defiance of the Church's prohibition on the participation of excommunicates in crusades, Frederick immediately set out on his crusade. For this, he was excommunicated again. He landed in Acre in September of 1228 EV, but his double excommunication made him extremely unwelcome among the Crusaders in the Holy Land, because any person aiding an excommunicate or any village harboring an excommunicate would automatically be excommunicated as well. Despite this rather severe impediment, Frederick managed to win Jerusalem from the Muslims through skillful negotiation with Al-Kamil, the Sultan of Cairo. He crowned himself King of Jerusalem on Sunday, March 18, 1229. For harboring the excommunicate king, the church was forced to excommunicate the city of Jerusalem, the very focus of Christianity itself. You plot, and God plots, and God is the best of those who set a trap. Pope Gregory, we assume his agreement with Al-Kamil, the Perfect, the Sultan of Cairo, was to get the Catholic Church to release Jerusalem from its holds, which by excommunicating the city, it did. Pope Gregory was naturally furious over the entire affair. He attacked Frederick's position in Italy, shouldn't be so dogmatic, and Frederick was forced to leave Jerusalem to defend his Italian territories from the papal forces. Gregory's successors maintained the struggle against Frederick over his Italian claims, and in 1245, Pope Innocent IV deposed Frederick and declared a crusade against him. Once again, Frederick thwarted their plans, this time by dying peacefully at one of his castles in Apulia on December 13, 1250, era Vulgaris. The church had finally prevailed against Frederick, but at very great expense in both resources and credibility. I'm still not sure that Jerusalem has been recommunicated. There has been some confusion in Masonic circles between Frederick II of Hohenstaufen and Frederick II the Great, King of Prussia, 1740 to 86 EV. In Masonic legend, it was Frederick the Great who supposedly issued the charter authorizing the formation of the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite. It is sometimes said that Frederick the Great was the first to shake the power of the papacy, but this honor clearly belongs to Frederick II of Hohenstaufen. References: Abulafia, David, Frederick II, a Medieval Emperor, Allen Lane, London, 1988. Stephen, The Knights Templar, Dorset Press, New York, 1982. Van Cleve, Thomas Curtis, The Emperor Frederick II of Hohenstaufen, Immutator Mundi, Oxford, Clarendon, 1972. Original publication date 5/9/95. Originally published in Red Flame No. 2, Mystery of Mystery, a primer of Thelemic ecclesiastical Gnosticism by Thal Apirion and Helena, Berkeley, California, 1995, era Vulgaris. The last of this set of 7, William of Schyren, by Thal Apirion. This saint is very obscure. There is no historical personage of any note whatsoever who was known by this name. Some have speculated that the reference may be to William I, the Conqueror, Norman King of England, 1027 to 1087, era Voga, or to the medieval English logician William of Sherwood, died 1267, or to the great historian of the Crusades William of Tyre, 1130 to 1187, or to the scholastic philosopher William of Ockham, who died circa 1249, or even to Kaiser Wilhelm of Germany, 1859 to 1941, bless him and his descendants. Generally, such speculations have been based on the assumption that the name Schyren is a typographical for some other word or name, either known or unknown. However, Schyren is actually an historical spelling variation of Schyren, also Schyren and Schyren and Schyren. Schyren. Schyren is an ancient castle in Bavaria located near Pfaffenhofen, between Munich and Ingolstadt. It was the home of the Counts of Schyren, who ruled a portion of Bavaria from the time of Charlemagne until 1115, when Count Otto II of Schyren died. His wife, Haziga, moved into a new castle in nearby Wittelsbach, thereby changing the family name from von Schyren to von Wittelsbach. In 1180, the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick I Barbarossa deposed the Duke of Bavaria, Henry the Lion, and bestowed the duchy upon Count Otto III. Who became known as Duke Otto I of Bavaria. The Wittelsbach dynasty maintained official royal title to Bavaria until the abdication of King Ludwig III in 1918. The Wittelsbach dynasty produced two Holy Roman emperors, Ludwig IV, 1314 to 1347, and Charles VII, 1742 to 1743. And at least one EGC saint, Ludovicus Rex Bavarii, Ludwig II, 1845 to 1886. None of the ancient counts of Schyren bore the name William or Wilhelm. There were, however, several dukes of the latter Wittelsbach period with the name William. Little is written about William I of Bavaria, 1333 to 1389. William IV of Bavaria, 1493 to 1550, is noted for his opposition to Lutheranism, when nearly all the neighboring nobility were embracing it, and for inviting the Jesuits to Bavaria, who established their headquarters at the University of Ingolstadt. William V of Bavaria, 1548 to 1626, is noted for his alliance with the Habsburgs and expansion of Bavarian territories. Duke Otto II of Bavaria, 1206 to 1270, is said to have been one of the patrons of the unnamed mini-singer known only as Der Tannhauser. When the Counts of Schyren moved to Wittelsbach, they converted Castle Schyren to a Benedictine abbey, populating it with monks from the Abbey of Hirsau. Abbot William of Hirsau, circa 1026 to 1091, had established Hirsau's reputation as a center of learning, and is still remembered as a notable mystic, monastic reformer, and scholarly researcher in astronomy and music theory. There was also a prior of the Abbey of Schyren, in the mid-13th century, era Vulgaris, named Wilhelm, but nothing significant is known of him. Schyren is noted for one historical event, the signing of the Treaty of Schyren on May 26, 1532, between the Landgrave of Hesse, the Elector of Saxony, the Dukes of Bavaria, and King Francis I of France, for the purpose of evicting the Habsburgs from the Duchy of Württemberg. Although the League of Schyren was ultimately unsuccessful in its mission, the Treaty of Schyren was probably more important for helping to establish the diplomatic reputation of the man who drafted it and signed it on behalf of Francis I, one William du Bellay, Lord of Lange, 1491 to 1543. William du Bellay was France's most able diplomat as well as a valiant soldier. Scholar and historian, Francis I employed du Bellay in a very large number of diplomatic missions to Germany, Spain, Italy, and England. He united many of the Protestant and Catholic princes of Germany against Francis's rival, the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. He also managed to obtain for King Henry VIII a favorable decision from the Sorbonne in the matter of his divorce from Catherine of Aragon. William de Bellay was also a committed humanist and an ardent protector of freedom of thought. While remaining a Catholic, he often intervened on behalf of the Protestants and the Waldenses against their persecutors. King Francis appointed him governor of Turin in 1537 and governor of the Haute of Piedmont, where Pope Francis I is from, and is very likely Grand Duke, in 1540. He was the friend of many writers and scholars, and kept a massive library at Turin. In 1540, suffering from gout and in need of the services of a librarian and secretary, he hired the physician of his brother Jean de Boulet to come to Turin. This physician was Dr. Francois Rabelais, who stayed with him in Turin from 1540 to 1542. Rabelais quickly came to revere his patron as the model of a wise and generous ruler and a learned and valiant knight. He accomplished some of his best work while under du Boulet's patronage, including much of Book 3 of Gargantua and Pantagruel. And this and his latter works contain numerous reminiscences of his time spent in Piedmont with du Boulet. William de Boulet died in 1543 during a trip to France, and Rabelais was present. He wrote a moving account of the event in Gargantua and Pantagruel, Book 3, Chapter 21, and Book 4, Chapter 27. Rabelais recalls the strange prodigies and portents surrounding the death of the knight, and tells of his earnest and lucid deathbed discourse in which he predicted many of the events which would befall France in the coming years. Rabelais later wrote a book about the high deeds of William du Bellay, which has unfortunately been lost. William du Bellay, Lord of Lange, who may have been our illustrious William of Schyren, or Schyren, is interred in the Cathedral of Le Mans. Reference: American Council of Learned Societies, Dictionary of the Middle Ages, Scribner's, New York, 1989, Benton William, publisher, Encyclopedia Britannica, 1768-1973, Franz Anatole Rabelais, translated by Ernest Boyd, Henry Holt and Company, New York, 1928, Glaser, Hubert, editor, Wittelbach und Bern, Die Zeit der Frauen Herzog von Otto I zu Ludwig dem Bären, Hirme Verlag, München, 1980, R.J. Francis I, Cambridge University Press, Cambridge, 1982. MacDonald William J., Editor-in-Chief, New Catholic Encyclopedia, McGraw-Hill, New York, 1967. Platard Jean, The Life of Francis Rabelais, Alfred A. Knopf, New York, 1931. Rabelais, François, Gargantua, and Pantagruel, 1564. Translated with an introduction by J.M. Cohen, Penguin, London, 1955 to 1982. Original publication date 5/9/95. Originally published in Red Flame No. 2, Mystery of Mystery, a primer of Thelemic ecclesiastical Gnosticism, by Thal Apirion and Helena, Berkeley, California, 1995. Today is 12/27/2020.